Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for. But instead, what I want to do is I do want to focus on a result that I did not expect to talk about at all on this episode of the Aaron Torres Podcast, and that was the Liberty-Arkansas game on Saturday afternoon in Fayetteville. Liberty, led by Hugh Freeze, who's been on this podcast many times, including last week, walked into Fayetteville as a 13.5-point favorite. And how about this? They walked out with a 21-19 win, third-string quarterback for Liberty. Worth mentioning that Arkansas run game that no one can stop, Liberty holds them to 144 yards rushing, and Liberty pulls off the stunner against Arkansas Saturday afternoon in Fayetteville. But why I want to talk about the conversation, listen, Arkansas is 5-4, whatever. Liberty, great story at 8-1 as they ironically get set to play my UConn Huskies this weekend. But that's not why I want to talk about them. Why I want to talk about them is for the same reason you want me to talk about them. It is for one simple question and one simple question only. It is this. With the win on Saturday in an SEC stadium, did Hugh Freeze become the favorite to get the Auburn head coaching job? I don't know if he's the favorite, but I do know this. If Auburn does not make the call and try to convince this guy to leave Liberty, then they are out of their minds and they are dead wrong. And I want to talk about not only his candidacy, but something that he said on this podcast that makes me wonder if this is the type of job that he was interested in. Now, let's start with Hugh Freeze' 30,000-foot view, because I do think, like, in terms of guys that have a resume that qualifies them for the Auburn job, he's won a few in college football. Now, listen, I've talked about it quite a bit. If Lane Kiffin wants the job, that's a tough thing to turn down. But Lane Kiffin was linked to a million jobs last year, didn't take any of them. We don't even know if any of them were offered. If Deion wants a job, going to be really tough. But Deion's never coached in the SEC, and I think Deion's great, by the way. This isn't a knock on Deion. There is only one guy that is available outside of Lane Kiffin that you know can win in this league at the highest level, and it is Hugh Freeze. At this point, the resume speaks for itself, and I know there was the off-the-field stuff with Hugh Freeze, but this is what I'll say about that. He got fired in 2016, okay? That was 6 years ago. Listen, we're living in a world now where Ime Udoka, in the middle of an investigation by one NBA franchise, could potentially get hired by another one. And so if Ime Udoka can get hired in 20 seconds by the new Brooklyn Nets, which it looks like it's going to happen, as I record, it has not happened yet. Hugh Freeze, it's been 6 years since things went south at Ole Miss. And my stance on this stuff, you guys and girls know, I'm not a moralist. If his family has forgiven him, if his daughters have forgiven him, if his wife has forgiven him, who am I to say what's right and wrong? All I know is that this guy is a great football coach, and I think he'd immediately upgrade Auburn. The resume, as I said, speaks for itself. Won multiple national championship or state championships, at the high school level. Went to an NAIA school named Lambeth, and by year 2 went 12-1. Spent 1 year at Arkansas State and won 10 games. Goes to Ole Miss in the SEC, and we know what he did there. Back-to-back New Year's Six bowl games, back-to-back wins over Nick Saban. Again, I think the stat is correct. There are only 3 people in college football currently with more than one win against Nick Saban: Gus Malzahn, Dabo Swinney, Hugh Freeze. Those are the only guys that have beaten them multiple times. Also, I could be mistaken. I believe he actually beat Kirby Smart in his last year at Ole Miss. So there is only one guy that has been in the SEC that has proven an ability to win at the highest levels of the SEC, and this guy is it. And I should mention, it's not like he's missed a beat at Liberty. Comes to Liberty. Keep in mind, this is a school transitioning to the FBS. This is a school that is just now starting to have a roster that looks like an FBS roster should. In year 2 during COVID, goes 10-1, wins a bowl game. In year 3, wins 8 games. He's won 8 games all 3 years, 10 wins in year 2. And right now they're 8-1, And they close the season with my UConn Huskies, which is going to be their backs up against the wall in that one. But they close with UConn and New Mexico, Virginia Tech and New Mexico State. I'm just telling you right now, they already beat Virginia Tech a few years ago. Could beat them again. They could very easily finish the regular season 11-1 overall. So this guy continues to win everywhere he goes, went to an SEC stadium and won. He's going to finish the season with as many SEC wins as Brian Harsin and maybe Jimbo Fisher, to be perfectly honest. And on top of that, I think he is a guy that would be interested in the job. Now, I don't know it for sure, and I don't know what Auburn is willing to offer. Remember, he makes $5 million a year at Liberty now, so you're not going to get him away for free. But what I would also say is he said something very interesting on this podcast a few days ago when I asked him about jobs. Now, when I interviewed him, the Auburn job was not open, but I asked him about the interest in other jobs, and he said a few different things. I'll paraphrase and I'll cut down his quote. You can go back and listen to last Thursday's show for the whole quote, but here is what he has said about other jobs. To this point, every single time my response has been that I just don't have interest in a specific job that is called, and I don't think that's the right fit. And I kind of, in my mind, Aaron, I tell my players, and I don't know that there will ever be a time when I leave, but if it does, it would be mine and Jill's mind, Jill's his wife. And there's only a few that we would really want to listen to that fits our culture, fits our location. In my mind, we're a college town family. I am not a big city guy. I don't belong there. And if that select few, I do kind of have a list in my mind. If they were ever to have an interest, it would be something we would certainly listen to. And I have no idea if they would even listen that we'd want to leave here because it's such a good place on the mountain. But there's very few we'd even take calls from. Call me crazy, but there's literally some I have zero interest in. And so look, I don't think Hugh Freeze is a candidate everywhere. He said, I'm not a big city guy. Well, take Georgia Tech off the list. He's making $5 million a year at Liberty. I don't think ASU and Colorado State can surpass that. But there is one program, small school, small college town in the SEC that needs a coach. And I think Auburn would be out of their mind if they did not make this guy a priority. Now, again, if Lane Kiffin wants a job, you got to sit down and have a deep – that's one. If Lane Kiffin wants a job, you got to sit down, pour yourself a drink, and really think about it. If Dion wants the job, you got to sit down and have a long drink and think about it. But if it's anybody else, go get Hugh Freeze. Now, he isn't going to come cheap. But can you imagine? Listen, just think about it like this. Hugh Freeze and a program that is in its fourth year as a FBS program. In its fourth year as an FBS program, they're 10-1 right now and just won in an SEC stadium. Now imagine sending him to a place where in the last 15 years, we have proven you can win a national championship. And imagine sending that guy there in the NIL era and the transfer portal era. Are you kidding me? It's a wrap. Just offer him the job, John Coe. What are you doing? Here's my thought on this. Couple things. One, the NIL stuff. Listen, I can't sit here and say who's doing NIL this and who's doing NIL that. What I do know, John Cohen, the AD, Ross Dellinger, who's been on this podcast before, he reported it a few days ago. Ross Dellinger said that part of the reason that John Cohen, the AD at Mississippi State, left to take the Auburn job was because Auburn's NIL setup was much better. They have millions of dollars put aside for NIL. It was interesting. I heard Bruce Pearl say this a few months ago, excuse me. Bruce Pearl was asked about what facility upgrades and this and that Auburn basketball needs. And he's like, no. All of our funds should be going towards NIL to make sure our players are taken care of. One, make sure they're taken care of when they get to campus. But two, as importantly, make sure that they are taking, that other schools aren't offering them more to leave Auburn and go somewhere else. So NIL is a priority there. And the other thing I can't help but think about what Hugh Freeze could do in the transfer portal with that offense, with that defense, with what he's doing. And I think this year's going to be interesting in the portal because look, Alabama's always going to have to fill some holes. LSU, USC, not Clemson. Dabo doesn't use the portal. Ohio State, they're always going to have to fill some holes. But when I look at those teams, last year, LSU needed 20 plus guys. Last year, USC needed 20 plus guys. This year, they're not going to need that. And so I don't think the competition is going to be as good. Texas needed 20 plus guys. They're not going to need that this year either. And so when I sit there and look at what Hugh Freeze could do with the portal, listen, I'm going to go coach speak now. I can't sit here and say, I can't promise a win total for year one, but I could tell you this. They would be much more competitive than they were this year. And I'm not saying he's going to have the Brian Kelly turnaround where he's going to be in position to win the league in year one, but I think they're very much bowl eligible next year. Give him 2 or 3 recruiting cycles, give him 2 or 3 years in the portal, give him NIL. He's competing with anybody. Again, that Liberty Arkansas game should have been an audition for Hugh Freeze. If he can go into an SEC stadium and win at Liberty, I'd be terrified as an SEC school at what he can do outside of that.